Everyone, it's Jacob again with update for the Shader Soccer project going on at the HobbyGameDev subreddit. Unlike last time, there are actually very few code changes this time around, mostly because I was working on getting some new UI screens up. So I'll give you a quick tour of those. First, you have a basic title screen. From there, you can get to some credits. Start button, which will go to this game setup screen, which will allow you to configure other things later. I just wanted to get it set up so I could start adding to it freely without having to worry about getting the actual scene set up. And then you can start the game, which is basically the same. There are a few minor differences, like the clock's counting down from 3 minutes, and I'll get to more with that in a bit. And there's also a return to title screen button, so you can easily go back there. So that's all for the actual updates to the game, which again is mostly UI stuff and not actual gameplay. But to create the new UI screens, I used Unity's new UI system, which I was thankful that came out right before I started working on this, because it actually made creating UI code a lot more, or creating UI stuff a lot more pleasant, and actually contributed to probably the lack of code I had to actually write to get this up and running. So the UI is kind of structured in this canvas. There's some basic text here. You can set all the properties in the inspector. And then for buttons, those are pretty easy to set up, and to handle on-click events, you can select an object and then select a method on that object, and I basically just created a wrapper script around application.loadLevel in order to handle these scene transitions when you click on a UI element. So for most of the UI stuff, I found there were sort of two ways which can be used separately or in combination to position elements. One is using kind of these raw position fields, which are relative to the anchor. And the other thing is to actually modify the anchors, which are relative to the parent canvas. I started mostly using sort of just raw position and have the anchor be in the center of the canvas, which are what these 4 little triangles are for. But I later found that it was easier to get sort of the position I wanted for certain things, like in the corners, if I actually modified the anchors and then sort of mostly left the position alone, accounting for the width and height of the elements I wanted. So there is one screen I didn't show you in the actual kind of gameplay, and that's just because it would take 3 minutes for the clock to count down to get to that point. But after the clock reaches 0, the game will transition to this winner screen, which will have text dynamically populated based on which team won, and then it will display the scores and then allow you to basically return to almost all of the other screens of the game. So that's all the updates for the actual that can be seen throughout the actual editor. I'll give you a quick tour of most of the new code. To actually sort of determine the winner of a game once the clock reaches 0, I created this referee class to actually pass data between the gameplay scene and the winner scene. I ended up going with some basic static variables which get set. So the referee class is pretty simple. It gets the current time from the clock, checks if it's less than or equal to 0, and if it is, then it basically retrieves the scores from the scoreboard, and then checks which team won, sets the appropriate enumeration value, and then it switches to the winner screen scene, which is that scene I just showed you, and that is controlled with this winner scene GUI script which just looks at the values, those static values in the referee class, and then populates the text dynamically. So that is it for this week. Next, I will be returning to fleshing out the game setup screen to allow configuration like colors for the actual players. But that won't be done until the new year, since I'm busy with Christmas and other stuff. So that's it for this week. So Merry Christmas to all, and I will have another update at some point in the new year.